You're listening to Weight Loss for Life Coaches, Episode 22, with Master Certified Life and Weight Loss Coach, Paige Bowman.
Welcome to Weight Loss for Life Coaches, the weekly podcast for coaches who are growing their coaching business and on their weight loss journey. Each week, we'll be tackling why weight loss feels hard and how to make hitting your weight loss goal the simplest thing you do all day. Hello, and welcome to today's episode. We are going to talk about when you're worried about other people's opinions, when they have opinions, and then when their potential opinions are still in your brain on today's episode. But first, a little update on my own journey. So I don't know if I talked about this already on the podcast, but for the first time in 9 months, I am doing my first 5-pound increment. And that's what I call the experiment that I have my clients do, where for 3 weeks, we set the goal to lose 5 pounds or 2.5 kgs if they're international. And we decide what they'll work on. And then we work on being in It's Done energy and doing those things and losing 5 pounds. And then at the end of that time, we will celebrate that they even went on the journey. And then we'll evaluate whether it was a fail or a success. And so I've decided to lose 5 pounds. And really what I want to do is work on my baseline skills some more. And I've also done work around the number on the scale at a lower number. And so I'm ready to put that all together. And this is the first time I have lost weight in 9 months. And it's been a little bit of a roller coaster. So I'm glad to be doing this work right alongside my clients and see some of the things that I've been able to work on that still feel natural because of being in maintenance mode for 9 months, and also what doesn't feel natural and what thoughts I have about the scale, about the journey, about losing weight that's come back up. And so I love it. I love experimenting. I love thinking about it as like something to observe, as gathering data, of being a scientist. And I know I've talked about a lot about that on the podcast, but I just wanted to share that I am in my own. It's going really well. Definitely, again, a bit of a roller coaster, but I am my own coach. So I just get to practice my awesome coaching skills on myself. And I can be a pretty resistant and stubborn client sometimes as well. So then I get to practice that with myself. But the other reason I wanted to bring this up is because I remember hearing about people doing 5-pound challenges within a week or lose 5 pounds in 5 days. And that's something that I've heard people talk about or market before. And I remember never liking that. And I didn't know why up until really doing this work on stopping overeating and stopping emotional eating and creating my own program. And so the reason I love my way of doing it and doing the 5 pounds in 3 weeks increments is because we're not just dropping weight to drop weight. We are picking the top things that we know to work on or to get better at that will have us then losing 5 pounds. And so it's not just, oh, I want to lose 5 pounds this weekend. It's, okay, this is how I want to lose the weight by getting better at these skills so that when I drop the weight, it stays off because I get better at these skills. So that's just a little sneak peek into why I do what I do. And I just wanted to add that on the podcast. I might do an entire episode about the 5 pounds and the way I set it up in the future. But for now, I just wanted to let you know that that's what I'm doing right now. It's going well. And I'm enjoying the roller coaster. I'm enjoying the process. And if you're interested about learning more about these 5-pound increments and want an episode on that specifically, send me a message on Instagram at LifeCoachPageB and let me know. Okay, let's get into it. We're going to talk about people's opinions, whether they say them out loud or not, and when we're worried about them and what to do about them. I had a client recently tell me that She doesn't necessarily want to talk to people about this journey, but they notice when she loses weight. And so for her, it's something that is almost a requirement to consider and to think about and to decide what she wants to do about it. And for others, they do want to share their journey and they want it to be a public thing on purpose. And for them, they still will need to do the work on what they think people will be thinking, because that's probably in their brain anyway. And then there are the times when people will just flat out tell you their opinions. And I want us to talk about what to do about that, because I think that's part of the discomfort of the journey, is that other people are involved. Unless you live in a 1-person cabin on a mountaintop in Alaska. Are there mountains in Alaska? I don't know. But unless you are by yourself, secluded, this is a journey that other people will be a part of, whether you want them to be or not. So I think it's something for us to talk about. And in my personal opinion, I don't think it's a bad thing that this is part of the journey. In fact, I think that growing and developing your ability to handle when people tell you their opinion and what to do about that, to set clear boundaries or help people support you, I think that could be an awesome form of growth. So I'm not mad about it, but I think there's a way to do it intentionally, and there's a way to be unintentional about it and maybe not like what the end result is. As you listen to this episode, I want you to keep in mind whether you have intentionally or unintentionally decided to share this journey or keep it to yourself. And then at the end of the episode, just think about what you want to do moving forward. Do you want this to be a more public journey? If even by public, we mean your close friends and family, or do you want to just keep this to yourself or keep this just between you and your coach? And just know again that there's growth available here, that if you want to share your journey, there's growth in how you relate to people on their journey. But also, you can decide that you're going to keep it private and that only the people that need to know will be involved, and that growth that can come from sharing the journey, it can come later. And I always say you have to meet yourself where you're at. So if for you right now, it's just focusing on the weight loss part, the not emotionally eating part, the not eating past full part, and getting to know your hunger, if that's the real work here, then cap it at that, and at a later time, do the work on sharing that with others. But I still want you to think about or keep this podcast and what we're talking about in mind, because like one of my clients talked about, people may notice and they still might have thoughts and they might voice them to you. Or even if you're keeping it to yourself, you might still be thinking about what other people might be thinking. So I think this episode is still relevant to you. Okay, so a big part of the idea for this episode came from a book I'm reading. It's called Adventures in Opting Out, and it is by Kate Flanders, excuse me. And she talks about in the book this idea of opting out of the way society and our culture normally does things. And she's not saying that there's a specific thing to opt out, but she gives examples of shopping, over drinking, overeating. For her, she opted out of living in one place for a long period of time. She wanted to travel long distance for long term. But what she's talking about here is opting out of things that is kind of the norm for everyone else. And in one of the chapters, she talks about one thing that you might struggle with if you're opting out of something that those around you are used to, that you might come up against their opinions and what happens after that. And so when I was reading this, I was thinking about my clients and those of you who are also on this journey of opting out. But for us, it may not seem as obvious, but I think we really are. We're opting out of eating the way we've been taught to eat. For me, that was eating to feel better, to prioritize feeling super full and feeling stuffed at most meals, to use food to help me keep my anxiety or my overwhelm at bay, to use food to get through a hard paper in college or getting through doing a launch in my business. So when you're deciding that you don't want to emotionally eat anymore, or you don't want to feel stuffed after every meal anymore, you are kind of opting out from what you've been taught and from what many do in our society, especially if you live here in America. So I think this book is very relevant. I would highly recommend it. I'm loving it. I'm almost done. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, or use a little bit of her passages to talk about when people share their opinions with you about your opting out journey, about your weight loss journey. Something she says is, it's hard enough to talk about something while you're going through it. It's even harder when you try to talk about it and it feels as though the person you open up to doesn't understand, or worse, doesn't seem to support your choice. She says, if you find yourself in this situation with someone, you have two choices. You can stop talking to the person and eventually cut them out of your life, or you can try to have more open and honest conversations and hope you can create a more intentional relationship in the process. And that's exactly why I wanted to do an episode about this. I know that for me, I have had many people comment on my journey, even before I became a weight loss coach. I have been on the weight loss, weight gain roller coaster since high school. And so there have been many opportunities for friends and family and acquaintances to comment on whether I've gained weight or lost weight. And so this has been a big part of my journey, is when people have opinions. So I know I'm not alone here. I know that that's a part of our culture as well, is to comment on people's weight loss or weight gain journey. Something else she talks about in the book is sometimes we can get defensive and want to argue for what we're doing as if we think that our lifestyle is a problem. And then it has us questioning our opt-out journey. And she also talks about sometimes we make assumptions of what people might be thinking, and then we might cut them off too soon. And so that's partly why I also wanted to talk about when we think people have opinions, even though they haven't said them, and there's something that we think that they're thinking, or it's something that we've experienced in the past and we just assume that that's what people are thinking. Sometimes that can get us in trouble as well. I'll talk about that in particular in a little bit. But what she offers is, she says, instead of cutting people off, what if you try to talk through the issue? And so this is what I wanted to talk about today, is if you have people who are making comments, who are making their opinion known on your journey, on your opt-out journey, on your weight loss journey, there is an option to talk through it with them. And you can do so in many different ways. And so she talks about helping them understand why you're going on that journey, because it's not going to be easy for someone to know really what you're thinking, what you're going through, how's it going for you, and why you're doing it, unless you tell them. And you don't have to tell them, of course, but to what this author is talking about is, and to her point, is we could help them be supportive. We could say things like, I know that you have an opinion about what I'm doing, and I appreciate you, but this is something that I actually don't want to talk about publicly. So I appreciate that this is something you want to talk about. It's not something I'm comfortable with. So if you're good with it, we're just going to keep this topic off the table. Or, oh, okay, so I appreciate your opinion. This is actually something that has been hard for me. I'm in that messy middle. And so I would just appreciate supportive opinions if you have them. And otherwise, we'll keep the conversation or the topic off the table. Or, I'm interested in everything you have to say, and I'm willing to hear it all. And I love you and I love your opinions, and I'm ready to hear your side or what you have to say. And I'm willing to do my work on understanding that. And it may never get to that point where maybe someone has such a strong opinion that it goes there, but I don't know. It may. It depends on your family and those around you and your friends. And so what I'm offering here is this idea that it doesn't have to be cut everyone off or share everything to everyone. There's options in between. In fact, something she talks about in the book is you can be choosy about who you decide to talk to this or talk to about this. And you can keep it off the table with some people and keep it on the table for others. It's totally up to you. But my point here, and the reason we're talking about this, is so that it's in your awareness, and then you can go be intentional and decide, do I want to share this with who? And what do I want to say and have ready for those that make their opinions known and who I do not want to talk to about this? I want to read this section in the book because I thought it was super helpful for me. She says, I genuinely believe that the people who love you want to support you. They also want to be able to talk to you. Maybe they won't say the right thing at first, but they probably wish they could. I can't imagine that your loved ones are sitting around thinking up ways that they can intentionally hurt your feelings. If anything, my guess is that they are sad that you are going off in a new direction and potentially leaving them behind. They don't want the relationship to end, the same way you probably don't want it to end either. The only assumption we should make then is that everybody is doing the best they can with what they have. Instead of getting angry or feeling sad or hurt by people, there's an opportunity to educate them, to tell them what you are doing and why, to teach them how to listen and how to love you, to ask for specific feedback, or to tell them you aren't open to feedback at all. These are all aspects of creating an intentional relationship with someone, friendship or otherwise. Like I said earlier, I think we do live in a culture or society that we tend to make our opinions known when people are doing things. And maybe not everyone is like this, but enough people are that I know I've had people talk to me about my journey unsolicited, and I know that my clients have, and I know people that have as well. And so I want you to think about how, yes, you're in a community of people, unless you're in that Alaskan mountain cabin, and how that might be something that you might have to deal with moving forward, especially if you are going to purposely share your journey. And why not go ahead and have already thought about the kind of feedback you're willing to receive, the kind of support you want from those around you, and what is potentially off the table, and then have your back on those decisions. Something else I wanted to add is that sometimes we can just acknowledge that the people that are making their opinions known are just telling you what they know based off of their own information. And so that's why I think, to this author's point of this book, and I'll put the information in the show notes for you to check out, but I think that it's important to think about people are just doing the best that they can. And sometimes that's making comments that we might not like and we might feel hurt, but that person is using what information they have and doing what they think is best. And if making that comment is what they feel is best, then we can acknowledge that. And if we don't agree with that, are we willing to open up and say that to that person? And as she says in the book, it might get messy and people might feel hurt, and you might be hurt by something they said, and they might be hurt by what you said back to them. But does that mean that we can't openly share our journey? I don't think so. Does that mean that we have to cut those people off or cut off relationships? I don't think so. And it may not get that deep or excessive in your weight loss journey and for those around you, but I know for me that I have had a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot, I guess, but I've had enough people make comments about my journey to know that there's no way I'm alone. And I know that if I hadn't done my own work around my mindset and what people think about me, that would have been very hard for me to keep going on my journey or to keep being friends with that person, for example. So I'm here to say not to underestimate your response, or if it does feel hurtful or if it does feel hard to share your journey. I think that it is a big decision, and it's something I want you to think about and have these kind of things or ideas at your ready when you do decide whether to share or not, or whether someone gives you their unsolicited opinion or not. Here's what this really solves for you is then you no longer need to worry about what others will think of you, because you did your due diligence of making the decisions ahead of time of what you will share, what you won't, who you'll share with, who you won't, the response you'll have. So because you listened to this episode and thought about these things, made these decisions, then when your brain has you or wants you to worry about what people will think, you can redirect it to these decisions. And then when someone does say something, or you get to put this in action and maybe it doesn't go well the first or the fifth time, you self-coach on it. You have compassion for yourself. You get coached on it. It's a beautiful cycle of putting yourself out there, something happening, you reacting to it, feeling hurt or upset, having compassion for yourself, and then doing the mindset work afterwards. And then the last piece I wanted to talk about is when you think people will have opinions, but they haven't voiced them, and they're really your opinions projected on others. And so what I mean by that is thinking that Sally down the block will think that you've gotten too heavy since the last time she's seen you since COVID. Maybe not Sally down the block, because you've probably seen Sally down the block, but maybe you went to your first conference and saw people you haven't seen in 2 years. And maybe you've gained 10 or 15 pounds. And yes, you're on your weight loss journey, but in your head, your brain is offering you, oh, they're going to think that you lost control, that you couldn't figure it out, that it's been 2 years since COVID. Why haven't you lost the weight yet? You might be thinking that they're thinking that about you, but they haven't said a word. So what I want to offer to you is that sometimes, even if you've heard other people say that about other people, I want you to stay in your lane. And when you think that people might be having opinions about you, I want you to get curious and compassionate with yourself. This is, again, where you can do your coaching or get coached on what those specific thoughts are. So, for example, if you were thinking that someone's going to think that you couldn't figure this out or you should have lost the weight already when you go to your first post-COVID conference, take that thought, have compassion that you're thinking, maybe I should have lost weight or I couldn't figure this out. Because, right, what was happening is you were projecting it to them, but it's the thought that's in your brain. So you write that down and you do some self-coaching. Go to my episode about self-coaching tools or coaching tools you can use on yourself, or take it to your coach. Don't let this just be what you think is someone else's opinions that you project onto them. Let it be something you do your work on for yourself. And then you get to grow in your mindset around your journey. And then you get to enjoy that person's company because you're no longer projecting their possible opinions on them. We all do it. If you're listening to this episode, you've done it. I've done it. But that doesn't mean we have to keep doing it. You could also go to the worst case scenario if that person does say that thing to you. What, similar to what we were talking about earlier, is do your due diligence. What will be your response? What do you want to say to that person? How do you want to help them be supportive? Or how do you want to set that boundary with them? Go to that place and then make that decision. And then when your brain worries about it, redirect it to the decision you made. All right, if Sally down the block says something about me having lost weight and she can tell, this is what I'm going to have ready for her. I don't want her to say that. She hasn't said that. But if she does, here's what I'm going to have ready. I'm going to get coached on that thought that came up in my brain, and then I'm going to let it go. And when my brain wants to worry, I'm going to remind it the work we've already done on it. Just this last thing I want to add. You can decide that the opinion you think someone else will have about you, or that someone else has said, that you will no longer or never agree with that opinion about yourself. You can just make it a non-negotiable. So, for example, if someone questions my intelligence, that's just like not something that I would even respond to. I don't question my intelligence. It's not available to me to be in that conversation with myself. I know I'm intelligent. I know I'm smart. I know that even if I am not great with words sometimes and I get words wrong, that has nothing to do with my intelligence. And I have done the work on this. This became one of my non-negotiable thoughts to have about myself, that I lack in intelligence just because sometimes I mess up my words. And so if someone has an opinion about my intelligence, or even the way I speak, if I guess they're related in this conversation, that's fine. They can have their opinion. I just don't agree with it. It's a non-negotiable for me to indulge in that. And then I can decide how I would respond to someone saying that or saying something about my intelligence or the way I speak to me. You could decide that your journey and how long it's taken or how short it's taken or how much you lost or how much you gained is not a problem. And it's exactly the way it was supposed to be. And that could be a decision that you make, a belief you have about yourself, and then you can practice making it a non-negotiable to think anything else. And then if someone has an opinion about your journey, just like if someone had an opinion about my intelligence, you just wouldn't engage in that. Like, I guess, thank you for your opinion, but that has nothing to do with me. I love my journey. That's how it could sound. And so another piece to this conversation about people's opinions or what you think their opinions are gives you the opportunity to see where you might want to make certain beliefs a non-negotiable to believe about yourself and to choose certain beliefs you want to have about yourself from here on out. Okay, let's get into our powerful questions for this episode. So this first one is, what do I want to do if my friends or family or others make their opinion noted? So again, we're going back to the beginning of the episode where we talked about you have options. And so I want you to think about what you would do if someone made their opinion noted, and have that at the ready. Just jot it down or think about it. And maybe if someone has already made their opinion noted, go back and give them that response. Another question is, do I want to talk about my journey? Yes or no? And do I like my reasons? What are my reasons? And do I like those? I personally go over this with each of my clients. We talk about, do they want to share their journey? Why or why not? And we get to coach on anything that comes up, very similar to what we're talking about in this episode. And then they can move forward from there. And it's a clean decision. And lastly, would I be willing to help my people be supportive? Why or why not? And it goes back to what we talked about. And from the book Adventures into Opting Out, where you can actually help people be supportive, not just throw their opinions at you, but you can help them understand you and how they can actually help you on your journey. Okay, that's it for this episode. If you loved this episode, leave us a review and give us 5 stars, and share this with others who are going on their weight loss journey and might be dealing with other people's opinions or their own projections. If you're interested in doing this kind of work where we dive this deeply into your weight loss journey and the mindset work, we can get on a consult and talk about what it would be like to work together. You can send me an email at hello@pagewoman.com requesting a consult, or send me a message on Instagram at lifecoachpageb, and we can get on Zoom and talk about it. All right, y'all. I will see you next week. Bye.